The National Protection Union of Colombia issued a statement reporting that the security would be reinforced for Álvaro Uribe's case judge Sandra Heredia. The Argentine government orders the sale of 100% of Intercargo, the state-owned ramp services company. And Saudi Arabia and France have opened a three-day conference at the United Nations with the aim of recognizing Palestinian statehood. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. A Colombian court has found the country's former president, Álvaro Uribe, guilty of witness tampering. Uribe, who served as president from 2002 to 2010, was convicted on Monday of trying to persuade witnesses to lie for him in a separate investigation, and the prosecutor is asking for a 9-year prison sentence. The case dates back to 2012, when Uribe accused the left-wing Senator Iván Cepeda of hatching a plot to falsely link him to right-wing paramilitary groups in the country. The court decided against prosecuting Cepeda and pursued his claims against Uribe, who becomes Colombia's first ever former head of state to be convicted of a crime. And also on Monday, the president of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, denied that there is political persecution from his government against former President Álvaro Uribe Vélez. This in response to the accusation of a senator of the party of Uribe, who accused the head of state of influencing the judicial decision against the former president. In this context, President Petro wrote on his X account that his government does not persecute anyone for political, sexual, gender, or religious reasons, emphasizing that he does not pressure the justice system, which is completely independent from the government. President Petro also criticized journalism for its work during the judicial process against Uribe and the pressures exerted against the judge, Sandra Liliana Heredia.
Nosotros queremos, antes que nada, garantizar la más absoluta transparencia del Estado.
And in addition, Colombian President Gustavo Petro firmly responded to statements made by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who had criticized the court ruling against former President Álvaro Uribe. Through his social media accounts, the Secretary of State asserted that Uribe was a victim of persecution by radical judges, claiming that his only crime was defending his country. The Colombian president responded quickly, describing these statements as unacceptable interference in the country's internal affairs. He emphasized that the world must respect Colombia's judges and recalled that many magistrates have been murdered for their commitment to justice. Foreign Minister Rosa Yolanda Villavicencio joined in the rejection, pointing out that Rubio's comments were an attack on Colombia's sovereignty. And the National Protection Unit of Colombia issued a statement reporting that security would be reinforced for Álvaro Uribe's case judge Sandra Heredia. A request for protective measures was made on February 11th, and after a risk assessment, the unit concluded it was necessary to strengthen the 44th Criminal Circuit judge's protection. In recent dates, media related to the former president, who has been found guilty of witness tampering and procedural fraud in a landmark trial Monday, were dedicated to profile the magistrate in addition to publishing her personal and family information. And during the 61st meeting of the OPEC and OPEC Plus Joint Ministerial Monitoring Committee, Venezuela reaffirmed its commitment to maintaining stability in the global energy market. The Minister of Hydrocarbons, Delcy Rodriguez, emphasized the importance of reviewing recent trends in crude oil supply and demand, particularly given the uncertainties and pressures currently facing the global economy. During the meeting, the established production quotas were evaluated and ways to enhance transparency and coordination among member countries were discussed. According to a report by the International Energy Agency, OPEC Plus countries increased their oil production by 1.2 million barrels per day in June. We now have our first break coming up. Remember, you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. I'm going to be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Ecuador, the number of state ministries was reduced from 20 to 14 with the argument of improving the country's efficiency. However, according to various analysts, this is unfounded and is not part of our structure for Ecuador's growth. Our colleague Gabriela Mena with the report.
El 24 de julio, el gobierno ecuatoriano anunció la reducción.
On July 24, the government announced the reduction and merger of different ministries of the state, leaving 14. The government spokeswoman stated that the objective is to improve the quality of service, without giving clear details of how many layoffs this will imply within the public sector, apart from the 5,000 that were announced. Meanwhile, for President Daniel Noboa, his decision is correct.
Sino que se vuelve más eficiente.
The state becomes more efficient, more direct, and also consolidates procedures so that it can better serve the people.
Para que se pueda servir mejor a la gente.
Las acciones del Ejecutivo han generado fuertes críticas.
The actions of the Ecuadorian executive have generated strong criticism. The first criticism is that the decision was based on a prescription, a request, from the International Monetary Fund to give way to the disbursement of loans to Ecuador, but it is not a conscious decision with a deep analysis, affecting the labor stability of families because the reduction of ministries implies a labor cutback.
Realmente no hay una visión técnica.
There is not a really technical vision of modernizing the state or really trying to make the state more efficient. What it is going to do is to produce this job instability for all of us.
The issue is that public services are going to deteriorate because I do not see any reorganization. It has not been shown to say why these items are being eliminated. What is the criteria?
A lo que añadió que si el gobierno tuviera
To which he added that if the government had a clear and not an improvised explanation about the actions it will take on the merger of the ministries, the outlook would be different.
Sería diferente. Para la analista Natalia Sierra,
for some analysts, one of the main concerns is the merger of the Ministry of Education with the Ministry of Sports, Culture and Heritage, along with the Secretariat of Higher Education.
For example, the Higher Education Secretariat of the Ministry of Education is suppressed if the Ministry of Education has not provided a good service in relation to primary and secondary education. Imagine that it also takes charge of higher education. Then all these things will demonstrate and show that the public system will deteriorate.
Para el analista Washington Andrade,
for analyst Washington Andrade, the decision started from a sense of decline in public institutions as part of the first steps to the privatization of state affairs.
What does this end up being? The pretext for saying that we need private investment, that health is neglected, and we need to privatize certain areas of health, which is what is also going to happen in the oil sector, privatize the oil sector and so on in all areas. In other words, there is an onslaught of an atrocious neoliberalism.
Meanwhile, different social organizations have already begun to call for marches against the government's decisions. The objective of the protest is clear: to make the executive branch become aware and take a step back in its decision. They denounce that the people should be heard, and that the president should not only work in favor of his elite circle.
Gabriela Mena, teleSUR Ecuador.
In Argentina, the government ordered the sale of 100% of the shares of Intercargo, the state-owned ramp services company. The measure, signed by Economy Minister Luis Caputo, establishes a period of 8 months to complete the transfer, following in the footsteps of other public companies authorized for privatization under the basic law. In addition, Secretary Luis Pierrini was instructed to terminate Intercargo's exclusive concession contract for ramp services. Public tender, which will be national and international in scope, will be conducted by the Transportation Secretariat and the Public Enterprise Transformation Agency. And in Panama, the Mulino administration has launched an offensive against labor and social rights, attacking unions and cutting pensions to favor the economic elites. Our colleague Reka Shandiramani with the details.
La arremetida del gobierno de José Raúl Mulino en
the right-wing government's onslaught against unions, the deterioration of pensions, the virtual reform of the labor code, the militarization of the country, and the imposition of extractivist projects are not isolated. There are links in a right-wing chain that seeks to solidify a pro-United States right-wing axe in the region.
Derechista proestadounidense en la región.
Está claro que hay una ola de extrema derecha que avanza.
It is clear that there is a wave of extreme right that is advancing beyond the neoconservatism of the 90s, where what proposed was only a change in the economic paradigm. Here there is also a cultural, political and social battle that is trying to reverse the progress and social policies. Molino's government possesses an advance in the region because there are those who emulate him in the political discourse, Trump, Milei, Chavez in Costa Rica, who has the same political position as Noboa in Ecuador.
Costa Rica, que tiene la misma posición política, Noboa en Ecuador.
Como en el Chile de Pinochet, hoy se repite el guión.
As in Pinochet's Chile, today the script is repeated: privatize everything, dismantle rights, and silence resistance.
1941 se crea la Caja del Seguro Social.
The Social Security Fund was created in 1941. In 1979, Panama enters the neoliberal economic policy. From then on, the philosophy is to dismantle labor rights, pensions, housing, health, education, recreation, and the environment. Dismantle rights.
Desmantelar derechos.
Panamá es hoy por hoy el campo de pruebas donde
Panama is today the testing ground where the United States and its allies are testing the militarization of Latin America. With a discourse of cooperation that hides a new colonial distribution armies protecting mining companies, criminalization of protest, and a government that legitimizes plundering. Even so, with the resistance of the Panamanian people, who as a collective political subject have awakened in recent years.
This small country that faces a violent onslaught by the U.S. empire and that seeks above all to make Panama the central axis of U.S. international neo-fascism here in Panama. We are standing up for the country. We are in a movement of fatherland or death, and we will win.
I believe in the youth, even though they are stigmatized. It is they, above all they, who have given the most wonderful and hopeful example that Panama can be different, and that we can have a society that we truly deserve, and not continue to be a brothel of the United States.
Panamanian youth not only set the tone in recent years, but also changed the rules of the game. In the last elections they won seats in the assembly, and in the streets they stopped the copper mega mining project. Today, they are the living proof that another Panama is possible.
Para TeleSUR, desde Ciudad de Panamá, Reca Chandiramani.
And on Monday, the World Vision Organization published an urgent report revealing the humanitarian crisis facing children in Haiti. The study, which is based on the testimonies of 840 displaced individuals, reveals that 71.6% of surveyed children have experienced hunger and 1 in 3 has dropped out of school. Additionally, 43.5% exhibit symptoms of trauma and 50% of families have experienced direct violence. Violence from criminal groups, hunger, and institutional neglect have created a moral crisis in the country that threatens the future of an entire generation. In this context, the World Vision Organization is calling on the international community to take urgent and decisive action in response to this critical situation. And in the United States, on Monday in New York City, a gunman went on a shooting rampage that killed 5 people, including himself. The shooting took place in a Manhattan skyscraper that houses the headquarters of the National Football League and the offices of several large financial companies. Among the dead are 2 men, 1 woman, and a police officer identified as Tidarul Islam. In addition, 1 person was reported seriously injured and transported to the nearest hospital. This shooting is the 254th mass shooting in the United States this year, according to the Gun Violence Archive. And on Monday, President Donald Trump confirmed that he had never visited the private islands of the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Trump added that he had turned down an invitation to visit the islands. These statements are part of the president's efforts to distance himself from Epstein, with whom he was close in the 1990s. The president has also changed his story about how their relationship ended. Initially, his advisors claimed that he expelled Epstein from his Florida residence because of his inappropriate behavior. However, now the president says he banned Epstein because he hired his employees. He did not provide names or details. The president and some of his allies have fueled conspiracy theories about Epstein's death, creating tensions even among his supporters. And on Monday, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov warned that the new trade agreement between the United States and the European Union will accelerate the deindustrialization of the old continent. During his speech at the 11th Pan-Russian Unionville Education Forum, Lavrov stressed that the cost of energy supplies from the U.S. will be significantly higher than those from Russian resources, a fact he considers will have serious consequences for the European productive system. The Russian foreign minister criticized the European authorities for their position on the signing of a treaty that would involve more expenses, even though it would have a negative impact on social welfare in their countries. We now have our second and final break coming up. We invite you as always to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English. There you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage, and more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. The final break, don't go away. Welcome back. Saudi Arabia and France have opened a 3-day conference at the United Nations with the aim of recognizing Palestinian statehood. The conference began on Monday, a few days after French President Emmanuel Macron announced that Paris would officially recognize the Palestinian government in September. In this regard, French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot said that the conference would also serve as a platform for other European countries to recognize Palestinian statehood, without clarifying which countries he was referring to. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabian Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud said that the kingdom was seeking World Bank approval to transfer $300 million to Gaza and the West Bank to address the serious humanitarian crisis in the territory. The talks are co-chaired by 16 other countries and delegations, including the United Kingdom, Ireland, and the European Union.
La paix est possible.
Peace is possible. We want to build an alternative to the permanent state of war in the region, and this alternative must go through the two-state solution, Israel and Palestine, living in peace and security. This is France's historical position, and it is the only possible path.
Et c'est la seule voie possible. Cette conférence est donc une étape décisive.
This conference is therefore a decisive step on the path leading, of course, to the emergence of this two-state solution, which leads up to the United Nations General Assembly in September, during which France will formalize, through the voice of the President of the Republic, its decision for recognition, and during which we will count on the collective mobilization that must continue before it is too late.
Qui devra se poursuivre avant qu'il ne soit trop tard.
For his part, Saudi Arabia's Minister of Foreign Affairs Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud stated that the creation of a Palestinian state is the only possible way to achieve peace.
And for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, normalization with Israel can only come through the establishment of a Palestinian state. That position remains the same, and it is based on a strong conviction that only through the establishment of a Palestinian state and only through addressing the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people to self-determination can we have sustainable peace and real integration in the region.
During a press conference at the United Nations headquarters, Saudi Arabian Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan reiterated that his country will not establish diplomatic relations with Israel until an independent Palestinian state is recognized. The Saudi Foreign Minister was emphatic in pointing out that the kingdom's position remains firm. Israel must fully recognize the rights of the Palestinian people. These statements coincide with those of French President Emmanuel Macron, who announced that he will recognize the Palestinian state in September. Prince bin Farhan also referred to the serious humanitarian situation in Gaza. He asserted that there are no conditions for talking about peace or agreements while the suffering of Gazans, the destruction of their communities, and the constant loss of lives continue. And in Palestine, health authorities in Gaza report that the number of people killed by Israeli bombing is nearing 60,000, while the number of deaths from starvation has risen to 147. Based on report from the Gaza health authorities this Tuesday, the number of Palestinians killed is 59,911. According to the authorities, this figure does not include the bodies that remain on the rubble. In addition, the Israeli genocide that has imposed starvation as a form of death has claimed the life of 14 Palestinians this Tuesday. In this sense, this figure rises to 147 deaths from starvation, of which 88 are children. It's important to remember that Israel has maintained a strict blockade of humanitarian aid since March 2nd, drastically worsening the crisis in the coastal enclave. And the Sudanese government strongly rejects the creation of a parallel government following the announcement made by the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. Authorities affirm that this is an illegitimate and dangerous action for regional stability and call on the world's governments not to recognize them. The Sudanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs expressed that it is a falsehood and a supreme threat to national sovereignty. The commander of the paramilitary forces, Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, unilaterally formed a coalition led by the forces he commands during a conference held in Nyala, the largest city in Darfur. Hamdan Dagalo was appointed president of a presidential council that describes itself as an alternative government. Like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. So join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For Telesur English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thanks for watching.
Identificamos cada pieza de nuestra geografía en el radar con una lectura geopolítica. Y es que hay procesos que impactan